we started off talking about reality check, and then we blended that with strategy, and we began to talk about how do you achieve a unique value proposition. Then Stuart joined us, and he talked about culture and values and the foundation by which an organization needs to grow. What needs to be present for you to be successful? Then I came back and we talked about on that Monday, how customer centric are you? And what the world says is that although every company wishes to be customer centric, most from the eyes of the customer, most are not. And we talked about that idea of a touch point. Then today, we talked about OPEX, and we talked about the really tough intellectual inconsistencies that are present in order to achieve world-class status. The foundation of that is the empowering the employee, that embedded, that ingrained cultural foundation that needs to be present. Second level up, we talk about continuous improvement and the commitment to focus on process. I don't care whether your focus is milling or drilling or deburring, or whether it's carbon dioxide sequestration, or whether it's 3D SLA. I don't care what your process is. If in fact you wish to become world class, we're going to have to shrink the time to perform the core processes needed to deliver that solution to your customer. Then we kicked it in and we took it up a notch. And we said, but we really need to think about two things in parallel. How do we look at the employee? Do we look at them as an employee or a whole person? And then how are we going to lead the change? And Pat Zagarmi's 6-point methodology that she put together, I've used for the last 20 years. It is my embedded checklist when I go into a big project-oriented assignment. My checklist goes through that exact list that Pat lined out. Then Stuart said, you know what? The plan is of no value. Unless you can execute to the plan with laser focus, and having 1, 2, at most 3 goals, you're not going to pull anything off. All right, now, what are the gaps that you've got? You've got some process gaps. We're going to let you work on those. You also have some skills gaps. Let's talk about then what that means from a Canadian standpoint. Virtually everybody I spoke with, this is the Honorable Jean Charest, who chaired the Aerospace Industry Association Canada recent exercise on Vision 2025. He said, Vision 2025 for Canadian aerospace at least, everybody agreed that Canada is in a fierce competition for talent. And you are. Because if there's a smart individual out there, a lot of organizations want her or him to join them, don't they? So how then do you educate that individual? How do you attain that individual? How do you retain that individual? And that's the Intel #1 core process. That's the core process at Intel. We had an aging workforce in Canada. Average age of aerospace workers, 54. You got a lot of programs that are offered to help you upskill, including this one. But what Gardy said in the people-centric leadership video is the following. People are not your #1 asset. You don't buy them, you don't sell them, they don't depreciate. Like you would write off an asset on your balance sheet and your P&L statement. Instead, he says, people are your #1 differentiator. How do we elevate the skill set of our workforce in order to become world-class in the business that we wish to succeed in? That's your objective function. With the virus, workers have realized that there needs to be a better work-life balance. We had a lot of people burning themselves out before COVID. Now, after a year or two staying at home, working from home, we're finding that although companies wish to have their workforce back on the job, many people are saying, wait a minute, I find my work-life balance to be a high priority. The report that came out in the news this morning said the following. What companies have concluded is that instead of having everybody on the job all the time, or everybody working from home all the time, we need to come up with what they called a hybrid solution. And most people and most organizations would agree that we need a hybrid solution. Now, there are a lot of ways to design that hybrid solution of work, and we can talk about that if you wish. So, critical then to your success is what skills do you have today? What skills are you going to need tomorrow? And what's your strategy for filling that skills gap? I'm going to talk about educate, attain, and retain the knowledge worker. So, what's the survey show? You got to have data. This is Gartner Group. This is 2019. I don't think it's changed much. 9% of organizations agree that they are prepared for the future of work. 1 in 10 organizations around the world, this is a global survey, 1 in 10 organizations said we're prepared for the future of work. First of all, we don't even know what the future of work looks like. And secondly, we don't have the organization in line to do that. 46%, half of them, lack the skills to drive that future performance. 1/3 of them have an inadequate talent base to drive the digital transformation. Please appreciate, we are in this migration to the digital economy, whether you like it or not, whether you want to embrace it or not, with all due respect, we're in it. Everything is smart. We talk about that in the electives. 1/3 of the organizations have what they consider to be an inadequate talent base to drive that transformation. So, what are the skills that you need to be a transformational leader? What skills do you need? Well, first thing you got to be is a rebel. Okay, keep challenging the what's in it, what the wow of the organization. Okay, keep challenging that. Do we have that unique value proposition today? How do we keep it? How do we get to a new value proposition, unique value proposition tomorrow? We have to be empathetic. We have to understand not only our customers' interests, but everybody's interests. Okay. This has to be an external view. This has to be an internal view. We have to be a storyteller. Stuart and Christy and I are trying to embed some stories in this TLP program. Why? Because people can relate to a story. When I go to Mexico and train, I've got two classes in Mexico I'm teaching this semester, one of which is an undergraduate industrial engineering, global industrial engineering program. These are top tier students. These are great students, but absolutely novices when it comes to how things actually get done. So I find myself telling a lot of stories, project oriented. And frankly, with all due respect, most Canadian companies aren't very good at execution. Most Canadian companies aren't very good at project management. If you are, you have a unique value proposition. Congratulations. Big picture, we talked about that. Understanding how to manage the internal politics and what's going on. Resilient. Some people are going to push back in anything you say or anything you do. It's a given today, isn't it? Whether it be direct or through social media, it's a given that somebody's going to push back. Experience in design thinking, lean enterprise startup, master design thinking, lean enterprise startup. I hope you've seen these. I hope you understand the methodologies behind them. Whether you use design thinking or business model canvas, I don't care. But the lean enterprise startup to grow your business is a great building block tool to have in your bag of tricks. Adaptive to exceptions and failure, I ask the tough question. Do you embrace failure or do you chastise failure? And finally, it's got to be strategic, and you got to be a strategic thinker. So how do you transform? Transformation is about talent, not about technology. Let me repeat, that's a key phrase, ladies and gentlemen. Transformation is about talent, not about technology. Harvard Business Review said, if you don't have the talent, you will struggle with the implementation of anything that you try. And they identified 5 keys to do this. Number 1, put people first. Appreciate. People are your number 1 differentiator. Number 2, focus on not just the hard skills, but the soft skills. I'm going to show you results and a survey that I've been conducting every 5 years. And I'm going to show you the results in just a moment. Drive change from the top, get it embraced from the bottom, okay? Embrace it throughout the entire organization. Make sure you're acting on the translation of data to information to knowledge. We don't do data processing anywhere more, do we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's data, isn't it? That's useless. Until you provide me with a context, I have no information. Until you provide me with background and learning, I have no knowledge. That's where the industry is going today with Industry 4.0, data to information to knowledge. And then we say in the entrepreneurial space, if you can't fail fast, make sure you succeed slowly. Perfect is the enemy of excellent. Alex is a brilliant young man, brilliant. But Alec, if you force fit a solution onto your workforce, I will contend that they're going to push back. Now, it might be a perfect solution, but they're going to push back. On the other hand, if you listen to them, be empathetic with them, embrace what they have to say, they may get you a long way to where you think you need to be, but they're going to embrace it, aren't they? They're going to own it. They're going to make it work. So the skills inventory then and training is the biggest challenge. Price Waterhouse surveyed 2,000 people in 26 countries. As we migrate to the digital economy, the lack of digital culture and digital training was the number one driver. It's the biggest gap that they identified. So the challenge that we have then says, okay, first of all, before we start thinking about skills, we better think about where the business is going. That's why this transformation leadership program is designed the way it is. Before you address the skills required, you better know where the business is going. Specifically, is the technology being used today going to transition to the technology that you wish to have tomorrow? Is the customer segment that you wish to support today going to be the same customer segment that you wish to support tomorrow, et cetera, et cetera? This kickoff exercise, this TLP, is critical. And then secondly, at what level of talent do you need? You have what are called tiers of talent within Canada, tier 0, tier 1, et cetera. There are lots of other organizational support tools. Apex, for example, has, a competency model for supply chain managers. So here's what we have to think about. This comes from Hilpert 6 years ago. Stuart and Christy and I have taken it upon ourselves to figure out how does this play out, because this is a U.S. view, okay? What Hilpert said today is that we've got some low-skill workers, we got a lot of medium-skill workers, and we got some high-skill workers. Well, what Hilpert says is we have to understand that tomorrow that skills mix is going to change. We're going to need a lot more low-skill workers. Those are the hands-on people that are told what to do and literally do it, okay? We're going to need fewer medium skills. Now, be aware, we're going to need fewer medium skills because we've got to elevate the skill base of our medium skills into high skill workers. Remember Dan migrating from Industry 3.0, where I programmed the NC machine tool, to Industry 4.0, when Dan simply gives the solid model to an artificial intelligence-based methodology that's going to program the machine. Somebody's got to program that AI, don't they? That's a different cat than the machinist. So my survey, this is a survey we did in 2017. We asked industry, as you're hiring engineers out of all the engineering schools throughout Mexico, what are the top gaps? Well, some of these are surprising. The biggest gap, John, that they had that they had to train their individuals was on understanding how to make change happen. That's the biggest gap. This is the VSAT Pareto, the SAT Pareto distribution for the survey that I conducted. Biggest gap is understand how to make change happen. That's hard to train at the university level, isn't it? You may want to think about how do you incorporate into your upskilling master plan, giving people the ability to understand how to make change happen. Second, silly one, how to make a presentation. I make my students all make at least 2 or 3 formal presentations. Third one, able to capture true requirements. Don't address the symptoms, get to root cause. Able to speak and present, you can read the list. This I can present you as well because this is a published paper. International Journal of Higher Education published this paper as a referee journal article a year or 2 ago. So when we talk about this, we have to think about expanding the skill set. We've got a lot of hard skills: automation, sensors, robotics, IoT, IIoT, analytical skills. These are highly mathematical. And we're going to have to upgrade the mathematical skills in almost every worker that we have to some extent. Additive manufacturing. I give each of my grandchildren, John, when they turn about 10, 11, or 12, I give each of them a 3D printer. Why? Well, because that's the world that they're going to live in. I lived in the Bridgeport milling machine, didn't I? I lived in subtractive manufacturing. My grandchildren are going to live in additive manufacturing. Okay. It's a whole different world. 3D print. Okay. So now, when grandma and I ask them, what do you want for Christmas? They say more filament. We need more filament. We got to make more parts. We got to design more stuff. These are 12 and 13-year-olds, but there's also soft skills like social skills, cognitive skills, data and analysis, data analytics, personal decision making, critical thinking, system skills. This, Laura, needs to also be in your portfolio, doesn't it? Christine, you've got a small cadre of people. I'm assuming that you get together on a regular basis, or at least a semi-regular basis. You got a group of really smart, hard skill folks. Really talented group, I'm sure. But do they have all the soft skills that they need? And that's for you to think about. So the skill master planning that I'm recommending that you put together, look at all your SATs, look at your biggest prioritized gaps, translate those gaps into what skills are going to be required and when, and then you're going to have to be cautious, okay? John said, well, we introduced this new toy to a 70-year-old, which I consider to be someone just in his maturity. That's not an old individual. To a 75-year-old, a 70-year-old is a youngster, okay? To that 70-year-old, that boombox or whatever you gave him, joystick or whatever you gave him, John, you could portray that as a toy, couldn't you? Now, the baby boomers, those of us that were born between 1946 and 1964, we're going to struggle with that, aren't we? We didn't grow up in the gaming world. A Gen X or a Gen Y, shoot, they're going to embrace it instantly. They're going to say, why didn't I have this last year? Think not only about what skills you need, but also the demographics you have within your workforce. Changing Dan is going to be different than changing Alex. Okay? You must consider, for example, educate, attain, and retain. Educate means, are you linked already with the key community colleges, polytechnics, and universities with whom to team? You can't just assume that you can walk onto campus when a graduating individual is ready to graduate and say, I'd like to hire you, and they're not going to come to work for you. They don't know you. You don't know them. You're going to have to nurture them. You're going to have to cultivate that individual. You're going to have to get involved in the right community colleges, the right polytechnics, the right universities, wherever you think the talent is going to come from. Then you're going to have to be attractive. Remember when I said I read all of your vision statements, those that I could find. Some were very attractive. The CERT vision statement was attractive. I wish to save the environment. I wish to help us to get to net zero by 2050. I like that. My grandchildren would perk up to that. They would go to work for CERT, okay? And then you're going to have to figure out, okay, if you hire them, how do you keep them? How do you retain them? Does the employee enjoy coming to work? Charles Savage said in a book called Fifth Generation Management, if I can make work fun, I can double productivity. I got lucky. I love going to school. I still go to school today, okay? I love going to school. And that's the kind of people that you want. That's the kind of working environment that you're looking for. So now the people implications that we alluded to, preparing the Canadian workforce, okay? The future of the enterprise, the pace of industry is going to change remarkably. The future of the workforce needs to be inclusive, with teaming and collaboration, and continuous learning is required. So we talked about this migration into Industry 4.0. Leaders are beginning to recognize the challenge that they face. This comes from Brian Householder, who runs Hitachi. The concept of digitizing everything is becoming a reality. Automation, AI, IoT, machine learning, a lot of other advanced technologies. Our challenge, he says, becomes moving to the next phase, changing how we think, how we train, how we work using data, information, knowledge to create value from the findings obtained through advanced technologies. I think he's onto something. What's the new normal? Lack of digital culture and training is the number one challenge. That's a Price Waterhouse white paper. The workforce is being supplemented and replaced with automated tools. The workforce knows it's coming, so how are you going to introduce it? Well, if they knew what you knew, would they come to the same conclusion that you did? How are you going to engage them in the decision-making process? How are you going to get them to embrace the change by having them own the change? Okay. So when we talk about this shift, we talked about the shift to Industry 2.0 was a shift from farms to factories. The shift to Industry 2.0 to 3.0, the shift from high-skill craftsmen to low-skill production. The shift from 3.0 to 4.0 is the shift to globalization and the shift to higher levels of horizontal organizational collaboration. That's a whole different skill set than what we're picking up today. So I thought I'd give you two examples. This is my bride. We've been married 50 years. We celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary November of 2022. 50 years with me. Can you believe it? She is a saint. Okay. But you walk up to Dan. Let's say Dan's been on the factory floor for years. He comes to work on time. He's there every day. He has a consistent level of output. He wants to make change happen. And you find that that repetitive task that Dan's been doing is really something that would fit well within your automation strategy. The robot's going to replace Dan. How are you going to introduce it? What's the workforce reaction going to be, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Dan's on the factory floor. Gail, on the other hand, is in the office. She is your scheduler. She is the lady who schedules and sequences every job out there, and she's been doing it for years. She's good, okay? But you know for a fact that there's an artificial intelligence software package that can do it better than Gail. And you think about, okay, can we replace Gail with this AI program? Are we going to get a better result? How are you going to introduce it? How is the workforce going to react? That, ladies and gentlemen, is your $64 question as we migrate to this new digital economy. I did 2 surveys. I asked sample size of 25 companies in San Diego a couple of years ago, are you prepared for Industry 4.0? The biggest gap, they said, this is another SAT, the biggest gap they had was the company had not mapped out their Industry 4.0 strategy, including the people. The next day we went across to Tijuana, had a sample size of 35 companies. Their biggest challenge highlighted was, and appreciate, this is a city made up of a lot of manufacturing facilities that are driven by U.S. companies that have gone outsourced across the border. Number one gap, management creates the environment. In Mexico, most of the work is controlled hierarchically. The operator is told what to do. But as you migrate into this new world, you can't have that happen. The mission is clearly understood by all. Those are the 2 biggest gaps that we found across the border. But the third one still said, we don't have a plan for migrating to this, including Industry 4.0 on the people side. Now, this is where it gets scary. And I want you to perk up, okay? We got these GPTs, these generative pre-trained transformers. Chat GPT. I can give Chat GPT 10 keywords, and it can give me a 1,000-word essay that I could literally hand in to my English department, and they wouldn't know the difference. Well, today we're starting now to have AI-based tools to address whether or not it's AI generated or not. But my grandson, who starts Stanford next month, studying computer science and artificial intelligence, my grandson said, Grandpa, give me 10 keywords. And I gave him 10 keywords, and he spit back a 1,000-word essay. It took maybe 20 seconds. What they say, and this paper was published March of 2023, very recent paper. They said there are going to be jobs that are going to have at least half the time reduced using an artificial intelligence support tool. Now, that's a nice way of putting it, isn't it? We're going to have 50% time reduction by using this artificial intelligence support tool. That's a nice way of saying it's conceivable that 50% of the people doing these things are going to be replaced, isn't it? Okay. Mathematicians, tax preparers, all jobs based upon synthesis and precedent. My son-in-law is a brilliant anesthesiologist. He writes questions for the examination to be board certified as an anesthesiologist. Josh knows, for example, that he's done maybe a few thousand processes where he puts you to sleep, keeps you asleep, and lets you wake up. A few thousand in his 5 or 6 year career. He knows that there's a tool out there that's going to be available very soon. It's not going to have 5 or 6,000 data points. It's going to have 5 or 6 million data points. And what he's going to do is plunk in the specifics of the person that's going to have the procedure, weight, age, physical issues, procedure that's going to be performed, et cetera, all the key parameters, and out is going to pop the best practice for putting that person to sleep. Now, would Josh have come up with that best practice? There is a high probability that he would have found the same thing. But there are certain cases, ladies and gentlemen, where he would get a better solution from the AI-based tool. The ones on the left, you can anticipate being present in the near future. The ones on the right, they claim are going to have minimal delta T impact. Ag equipment operators. But I've got autonomous tractors running down here in the ag farm down in Maricopa. I've got research going on in terms of autonomous tractors. Athletes. I don't think I can replace an athlete with an AI athlete. Auto glass installers, cooks. Now you got to question whether or not an artificial intelligence-based recipe generating capability is going to replace a cook. Dishwasher, stonemason. Any of the jobs that have physical dexterity and effort required probably are not going to have as much of an impact, but you got to factor this into your planning. So the next series of charts comes out of a report from Gallup in 2021. And the report is called the American Upskilling Study. 15,000 labor force adults were surveyed. This is a massive survey coming out of Gallup. Yes, it's USA. But I think you need to look seriously at this from a Canadian perspective as well. It should at least, as a minimum, make you think. Number one, what they found. Half of production workers wanted to be upskilled. 21%, 1 in 5, were actually upskilled. Half of them wanted to be upskilled. 20% were actually participating. There's a gap there. What they found is if we upskilled the individual, the average benefit to the individual is about 8.6%. So if you train them to afford them the opportunity to be upskilled, they on average were getting about an 8.6% bump. How do you attain that individual? 65% of prospective employees looked at upskilling as a perk. If you want to hire the best, they're going to have to see a career path, aren't they? Your vision needs to include the following statement or something related thereunto. We provide you with the ability to improve yourself on a regular basis. How you phrase that is totally up to you. But if you want to bring in the best talent, you're going to have to give them the chance to keep getting better. How do you then keep them? 60% of current employees looked at upskilling as to whether to remain at the current employer. Okay? So a perk to hire them is to offer upskilling. A perk to keep them is to offer upskilling. But you can't offer it and not do it. Okay? If half of your workforce, first bullet, if half your workforce wants to be upskilled, but you're only upskilling 1 out of 5, frustration is going to happen. So you got to be really cautious about how you roll out this program. What upskilling did they want? This is an interesting survey, okay? This comes again from Gallup. Technical and digital, the code here is this is what was taught in blue. This is what they wanted in copper, okay? Many of them wanted technical skills, digital skills. They wanted managerial skills. They wanted leadership skills. They wanted specific skills in their field. They wanted social skills and communication skills. And then it went down. What they were being taught are skills specific to their field, some technical skills, some communication skills, but you can see the gaps that exist there. Okay. Fundamental considerations. What specific interest did the worker have? Workers wanted paid upskilling. Workers wanted upskilling during working hours. Now, here's again where the hybrid model is kicking in. What companies are saying is, I want you to be committed to this. Okay. I may pay for it, but you may need to put some skin in the game by putting some of your effort into it. So what we're finding is the following. Some organizations are saying, okay, if you're taking a 4-hour course, I'll free up 2 hours, you invest 2 hours. If you're taking a 4-day course, I'll invest 2 or 3 days, you invest a day or two. Okay? Follow me? That's what's called a hybrid model. And that seems to be working okay because you want them to be committed to it and you want them to have skin in the game. Impact education, overall satisfaction, 70% are saying, yep, this is what I'm looking for. Now, the question then becomes, should you worry about losing the trained employees? You invested, John, in Chris and Christine, you invested in your talent base. Should you worry about them going to work for the competition? Sure. Okay. 39% of those surveyed said they experienced advancement at current employee. 30% said they used it to attain a better job. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is the following. Are you going to attain and retain the talent that you want if you're worried like the Dickens that if you train them, they're going to go to work for the competition? I call those the drag companies, okay? Instead, what happens if you become the magnet? The magnet says, I'm going to attract the talent by upskilling, whether it be hiring you and offering to upskill or keeping you and upskilling. Now, do I run the risk that you're going to work for the competition? Yeah. But who's going to backfill the individual that you just lost? A more qualified individual. So you have to ask yourself strategically, do you want to be that magnet that draws the talent to you with the risk that you're going to lose some? Yes. Or do you want to be what I call the drag? Okay. You're scared to death that if you invest in somebody, they're going to go to work for the competition. So we're not going to train them. That's strategic. So let's do the skill set. Let's talk about the skills SAT questions that I have to ask. Do you know what skills you really have today? Do you know what skills you need tomorrow? IBM said, we believe that 100 million American workers need to be retrained in the next 4 years. 100 million American workers. This is the chief human resource manager at IBM. Of course, they'd like to offer the training to those 100 million workers, so there's a bias in their commentary there. Develop a questionnaire with the support of the leadership team. You're going to need to customize that to your business, okay? And we've got the skill set. Now, the exercise then is when you do the skill set, you're going to have to come away with the start of some piercing questions. How many people do we need? Of what skill level? Where are they today? How long is it going to take to find them and to hire them? What we're finding, and we did an aerospace a program, and they're finding that there are not a lot of skilled machinists available in Ontario, right, Stuart? There were not a lot of skilled machinists in Ontario. They had to go to Indonesia. They had to go to Malaysia. They were using the immigration laws that Canada is now fostering to bring talent into Canada. And it's taking them 11 to 12 months and a lot of money to bring in a machinist from Indonesia or Malaysia. Scary, but true. So there are 4 sections of the skill set. One talks about the core skills that we think everybody's going to need. There's a second section dealing with problem-solving skills, a third dealing with corporate citizenship, a fourth dealing with industry skills, okay? Please take it seriously and then analyze why these gaps exist and create your skills master plan. Okay, so in closing, I'm going to close, then I'm going to hand it to Stuart, then we're going to hand it to Christy, then we're going to let you go about finishing up this last SAT. you got some gaps. You're going to identify gaps from the 10 SATs that you've done in the core, and there will be more SATs that you do when you do the electives. I hope you join us for the electives. Cluster those gaps and then dig in and find out what's the root cause of that gap, okay? Look at what your company has from each of these SAT areas that we've discussed, and there are other areas that we will offer in the electives: innovation, supply network, carbon strategies, project management, circular economy, industry 4.0, new product and process development, project management, okay? Then look at those, figure out the skills that are needed, rank order them in terms of what your biggest priorities are, and then say to yourself, do we have the people already that we could use this as a perk to help them upskill themselves? Number one, you already have the talent, but do we need to upskill who we have? Number two, we don't have the talent. We may have to go about hiring somebody to fill that gap. That's number two. But number three, as I mentioned, whether it be in community colleges or colleges or universities or polytechnics within Canada, do we need to start to cultivate the talent as they progress through school, recognizing that you're not going to be able to hire somebody fresh out of school if they don't know you? I would not go to work for you, not in today's world. If you're a skilled artificial intelligence expert from Stanford University, like my grandson in 4 or 5 years, how many job offers is he going to have? And I will contend Joshua can write his own ticket, can he? Okay. So before we do that, I'm going to stop. I'm going to hand it back to Stuart. Let you discuss the entire program that we've walked you through here, and then start talking about educate, attain, and retain the knowledge worker. I want to thank all of you. I hope that was of value. We worked our tail off. I hope that program hit a nerve. You're not done yet by any means. This is just scratching the surface in terms of identifying where the gaps are. Highly recommend you finish up the 10 SATs. Thank you, folks.